That morning was supposed to be perfect, but instead, my 7-year-old son ended up standing frozen on the school bus steps while a neighbor screamed that he didn't belong here. And then, as if that wasn't enough, she actually dialed 911 on a child my child for daring to ride to school. That was the moment my world tilted, the moment I realized we weren't just living in a quiet suburban street, we were living next door to a monster who was about to drag us into hell. I can still see him, my boy, in his too big backpack, clutching the rail with one hand, waving at me with the other, so proud of this milestone. Then came that shriek splitting the calm morning like a siren. "Get him off that bus!" A heavy-set woman in a ratty gray robe was pointing at him, her face twisted with hate. For a few seconds, I just stood there stunned because who does that? Who sees a little kid heading to school and decides to unleash pure venom? The bus driver, poor guy, looked completely lost. "Ma'am, he's on my route. He's a student," he said, but she just doubled down, screaming about how my son was casing houses. She stomped back into her house, and the next thing I knew, she was calling the cops. The siren started faint, then grew louder until a black and white rolled up behind the bus. And there I was, standing in the middle of my peaceful neighborhood with red and blue lights flashing, my son clinging to my leg, and an officer asking me for ID to prove we lived there. I handed it over, trying not to lose it, but inside I was boiling. Would he be asking for ID if I were a white mom with a blonde kid? Probably not. Still, the damage was done. My son's bus pulled away without him. The other kids staring, whispering. My boy looked at me with eyes that asked, "What did I do wrong?" And I had no answer. That morning, part of his innocence was stolen. The fallout started immediately. A day later, we got a letter from our HOA. Yeah, the same HOA that sends nastygrams if your trash can sits out too long. According to the letter, a complaint had been filed against us for causing community alarm. The language was bureaucratic, but I knew exactly whose fingerprints were all over it. The woman across the street wasn't content with humiliating us once she was dragging us into every system she could weaponize. Meanwhile, on the neighborhood app, she posted a rambling screed about a suspicious boy trying to board the school bus. She painted herself as some kind of hero who bravely protected the neighborhood. And people were thanking her. Thanking her. My stomach turned as I scrolled the comments, seeing strangers applaud her lies while my son sat silent at the dinner table pushing peas around his plate. I'll admit it, there was a moment when I thought about giving up. Packing up, selling the house, starting over somewhere else. I thought maybe she's right. Maybe we don't belong here, not because we're wrong, but because no one will ever see us as anything but outsiders. That thought gutted me. I watched my son retreat into himself, claiming tummy aches so he didn't have to ride the bus, and I started to wonder if fighting was even worth it. But then something shifted. Our neighbor Sarah knocked on our door, nervous but determined. She'd seen everything from her window. "If you need a witness, I'll speak up," she told me. I almost cried right there. And then the school confirmed the bus cameras had audio, clear damning audio of every slur that woman spewed. Suddenly, I wasn't just a mom shouting into the void. I had allies, I had evidence, and I wasn't going to back down. We went into battle mode. My husband dug into the HOA bylaws and found out any complaint had to be backed by evidence we had the right to review. Meanwhile, the principal escalated the incident to the district and the DA's office took interest. The tide was turning, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the smallest flicker of hope. The HOA meeting was surreal. Picture a bland community clubhouse, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, board members lined up behind folding tables. Maggie, that's her name, sat across the room in a floral dress and pearls, looking like she'd baked cookies for Sunday school. If you didn't know better, you'd think she was just somebody's sweet grandmother. But I knew. I knew what came out of her mouth that morning, and I knew what was about to play on the screen. When the video rolled, the room went dead silent. You could hear her voice echo through the speakers, dripping with hate, as clear as if she were standing there screaming again. Board members stared at the floor, at the ceiling, anywhere but at her. For the first time, I saw a flicker of panic cross her face. And then the decision unanimous. Her complaint was dismissed as malicious, and she was issued a formal warning for abusing HOA procedures. That was victory number 1. But the real fight was still ahead, her day in court. The prosecutor laid it all out, filing a false police report harassment and, yes, with a hate crime enhancement. When I testified, I felt my hands shaking, but I told the story exactly as it happened, my son's excitement, her screeching voice, the way his shoulders slumped when he thought he'd done something wrong. The defense tried to spin it, calling her an elderly woman with poor eyesight who just made an honest mistake. But then the jury saw the video. They heard her voice. They saw my boy on that bus step, and you could see it in their faces, they weren't buying her lies. The verdict came back faster than I expected, guilty on all counts. The word echoed in the courtroom and I felt a sob rip out of me, equal parts rage and relief. She slumped in her chair, her face pale while her son stormed out, glaring at us like we were the criminals. But the truth had spoken loud and clear. She was forced to sell her house to leave our neighborhood to carry the weight of a conviction that labeled her exactly what she was. And though it didn't erase the fear my son lived with, it did something important. It showed him that lies can be dismantled, that hate can be exposed, that sometimes justice does come through. Hate might scream the loudest, but the truth always carries farther.